Let me tell you about this guy. Let's call him Leo. Leo had one of those faces that made you think he couldn't even tell a tiny white lie. He looked like the kind of person who would help an old lady cross the street, even if he was late for his own birthday party. Whenever something went wrong, Leo was always the first one to point a finger. If a glass of milk spilled, it was because someone put it too close to the edge of the table. It was never, ever, because he knocked it over. He was a real expert at looking shocked and disappointed, like he couldn't believe someone else had messed up again. It was a pretty good trick, and for a long time it worked like a charm. His family thought he was just a bit unlucky. They'd say things like, "Oh, poor Leo, always in the wrong place at the wrong time." They would pat him on the back and tell him it wasn't his fault. If he was late for a family dinner, it was because the traffic was terrible, a complete nightmare. If he forgot to buy a birthday present, it was because the store had closed early, which was so unfair. He had a whole book of excuses, and he was really good at selling them. His stories were always so detailed that you couldn't help but believe him. He painted himself as the victim every single time, a good guy just trying to get by in a world full of clumsy, forgetful people. The thing is, his family really wanted to believe him. It's easier to think someone you care about is just unlucky than to think they're a liar. So they went along with it. They cleaned up his messes, both the real ones and the fake ones. They made excuses for him to other people too. "You know, Leo," they'd say with a sigh. Things just seemed to happen around him. They became his backup singers, humming the tune of his innocence without even realizing they were part of the act. This support just made Leo even better at his game. He didn't have to worry about the consequences because someone else was always there to take the blame or fix the problem. But little cracks started to show in his perfect, innocent act. It was like a cartoon wall that looks solid until you look closer and see it's just painted cardboard. Someone would remember that the store he said was closed was actually open late on Thursdays. Or they'd notice that the terrible traffic he complained about didn't exist because they drove the same way and it was clear. The excuses started to sound a little too familiar, a little too polished. People started to whisper and exchange looks when Leo launched into one of his stories. The foundation of trust was beginning to crumble, one tiny, unbelievable excuse at a time. It was only a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down. The big change happened when his family started to connect the dots. It wasn't one huge event, but a bunch of small ones. His sister, for example, realized that every time she lent him her car, it came back with a new scratch or an empty tank of gas. Leo's excuse was always something crazy, like a flock of angry birds attacked the car or a rogue shopping cart rolled into it from a mile away. At first, she thought it was just bad luck. But after the fifth time, she started to think that maybe, just maybe, the problem wasn't the birds or the shopping carts. Maybe the problem was the person driving the car. Then his brother noticed something weird with his video game collection. Games would go missing, and Leo would swear he hadn't seen them. He'd even help his brother look, acting all concerned. But then, weeks later, the brother would find the game at a used game store. Leo's defense was always the same. Someone must have stolen it and sold it. That's terrible. He would shake his head in disbelief, a master of fake sympathy. The family started talking to each other, comparing stories. It turned out Leo had bad luck with everyone. He was like a walking disaster zone, but the disaster only ever affected other people's stuff. Once they saw the pattern, they couldn't unsee it. It was like one of those magic eye pictures. At first, it's just a bunch of squiggles, but then you see the hidden image, and you can't go back to seeing just the squiggles. They realized Leo wasn't unlucky. He was a professional blame shifter. They started to distance themselves from him. They stopped lending him things. They stopped asking him for favors. When he'd call with a new sob story about how something went wrong, they'd just say, "Oh, that's too bad," and change the subject. The wall of support he had relied on for so long was gone. Leo did not like this one bit. He said they were being unfair and that they had all changed. He claimed that the only reason they ever liked him was because he used to have money. This was a classic Leo move. When in doubt, blame someone else. The funny thing was, he never really had his own money. He was always using theirs, borrowing a few bucks here and there and conveniently forgetting to pay it back. He was trying to flip the script, making them the bad guys for not trusting him anymore. But his family knew the truth now, and his old tricks just weren't working. The biggest problem started with money. Not just a few bucks for lunch, but a lot of it. The family had pooled some money together for a big vacation, a once-in-a-lifetime trip. They decided to put Leo in charge of the travel fund because he swore he had found a special high-interest savings account. He made it sound so official and important. He showed them fake charts and printed out fake bank statements. He told them their money was growing every day, safe and sound. They trusted him because, well, he was family, and he seemed so confident and responsible when he talked about it. For months, everything seemed fine. People would ask Leo how the vacation fund was doing, and he'd give them a big smile. "It's doing great," he'd say. "We've already earned enough extra to upgrade our hotel rooms." Everyone was thrilled. They started planning what they would do and what they would pack. They believed their money was not just safe, but was actually working for them, thanks to clever Leo. He was the hero of the family, the one who was going to make their dream trip a reality. This was his biggest performance yet, and he was nailing it. He was the star of the show. Then, the time came to actually book the trip. The family asked Leo to transfer the money so they could pay for the flights and hotels. And that's when the excuses started. At first, it was small things. "The bank's website is down for maintenance," he'd say. The next day, he'd claim, "There's a 72-hour hold on large transfers for security reasons." He was buying time, but the family was getting nervous. The excuses were starting to sound flimsy, just like his old excuses about scratch cars and missing video games. The dream vacation was starting to feel more like a nightmare. They demanded a real answer. Finally, the truth came out, but not from Leo. His sister did some digging and found out that the special high-interest account never existed. The money was gone. When they confronted Leo, he didn't confess. He didn't even look guilty. Instead, he got angry. He told them he had hidden the money somewhere super safe, but now he couldn't remember where. And he said it was their fault. "You were all too curious," he yelled. "You kept asking me about it, and all your pestering made me stressed out, and I forgot the location. If you had just trusted me, the money would be fine." It was the most ridiculous excuse they had ever heard. Even after the big blow-up about the missing vacation money, Leo didn't change his ways. You'd think getting caught in such a huge lie would make a person stop and think, but not Leo. His strategy was simple. If your first excuse doesn't work, just make up another one and say it louder. Months passed, and the family tried to move on, though they were still out a lot of money. But anytime someone even hinted at the topic, Leo would go on the defensive. He acted like he was the one who had been wronged. He was the real victim in this whole mess, at least according to him. If anyone asked him a simple question like, "Hey Leo, have you remembered anything about where you might have put that money?" he would explode. He'd say things like, "Why are you bringing up the past? Your constant questioning is the root of the problem." It was like he had convinced himself that their questions were a form of attack. He believed that if everyone would just shut up and forget about it, the problem would magically disappear. He never once said, "I'm sorry," or "I made a huge mistake." It was always someone else's fault for being too nosy, too pushy, or too curious. His refusal to take any responsibility was the final straw for his family. They couldn't trust a single word he said anymore. How could you? The man could look you straight in the eye with a face as innocent as a puppy and tell you the sky was green. The trust that had taken years to build was completely destroyed. It's hard to have a relationship with someone when you have to second-guess everything they say. They stopped inviting him to things, not to be mean, but because it was just too exhausting to be around him. His world became very small and lonely, but of course, that was their fault too. This whole story about Leo teaches you a really important lesson. Trust is like a glass vase. It's beautiful and valuable, but it's also super fragile. Once it's shattered, you can try to glue the pieces back together, but it will never be the same. There will always be cracks. Honesty is the glue that holds trust together. Without it, everything falls apart. Leo chose lies and blame over honesty. And in the end, he didn't just lose money, he lost his family. And that's a price that's way too high to pay for not admitting you messed up.